It was here, 500 years ago, almost exactly where the Panama Canal cuts through the hot, humid rainforest, that a true crime story began. But few of the criminals were ever hunted down and brought to justice. Here, in fact, crime paid off, nearly every time. Chapter 1 of the story begins in September 1513. A wild bunch of Spanish adventurers had set out through the rainforest of Central America in search of gold and other treasure. What they found first, however, was not booty, but a sea no European had ever set eyes on before. They had discovered the Pacific Ocean. On learning that only a narrow land bridge separates the Pacific from the Atlantic, the Spaniards on the Atlantic side dismantled some of their ships and had the sections transported on the backs of slaves along trails through the jungle to the Pacific, where the vessels were rebuilt. Now, Central and South America could be conquered from the west as well. Soon, the first Spanish settlement on the Pacific was established, Nuestra Señora de la Asunción de Panama, because on their expeditions from this side of the isthmus, the Spaniards had at last found what they were mainly looking for: gold. It was the gold of the Incas in Peru. Panama became Spain's most important base for the serious pillaging which now began. For 200 years, the Spaniards brought their booty here in ships. Load after load was taken ashore. The spoils were transferred to mules and donkeys, which carried them over this bridge and on down the Camino Real, which by this time had been reasonably improved, to the Atlantic side of the land bridge. From there, the booty was shipped over to Spain. Well-organized crime. But the journey from one sea to the other and on across the Atlantic was both arduous and at times dangerous. The valuable cargo was also coveted by other criminals. Spanish vessels were attacked by English pirates, first by Francis Drake and later by Henry Morgan. In 1671, Morgan sacked Old Panama. In their despair, its inhabitants set fire to their city themselves. Chapter 2. With no roof over their heads, the Spaniards immediately began work on the construction of a new base for their raids, not far from the ruins of the old town, but this time on a peninsula which was easier to defend. They quickly recovered from the trauma with Morgan because the profits from the pillaging in Peru and the surrounding countries were enormous, and by now the slave trade was booming as well. The numerous churches and monasteries in the city also flourished, thanks to the shady dealings of its otherwise pious citizens. The new cathedral. The Church of San Jose. Parts of its splendid altar stem from the preceding church, which had been abandoned. Henry Morgan is said to have overlooked the precious work because the priest had hurriedly covered the gold with a coating of black paint. Chapter 3. The descendants of the Spanish settlers had finally cut their ties with Madrid and driven out the soldiers of the king. Now they plundered on their own account. Their leader was Simón Bolívar. In Panama, he tried to organize what could be described as the United States of South America. It was in this room in 1826 that the decisive meeting was held, but the descendants of the Spaniards couldn't reach agreement, so the United States of America had no trouble in thwarting Bolívar's plan. The North Americans, in fact, now regarded Latin America as their backyard. Chapter 4 began a century ago. The United States built their own canal in Panama, settled to the right and left of it, and stayed for nearly 100 years. It wasn't until 1999 that the Americans handed over the canal and the canal zone, stopped collecting dues from ships using the canal, withdrew their troops, and ceased interfering quite so openly in Panama's affairs. The Panama Canal has linked the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans for over 100 years. And for the last 40 years, this bridge, which was also built by the United States, has linked North and South America. Such an outstanding location was good for business 500 years ago, and it still is today. It's just that deals are no longer struck in the tiny old city dating back to the 17th century. Panama now flexes its commercial muscles in a new and much bigger city. Only the government and 4 of its ministries have remained faithful to the old city. And the head of state still resides in the presidential palace there, which was built in 1673. Significantly, and it's certainly no coincidence, here Justicia gets by without a blindfold. Built in 1907, the National Theatre is being restored. For many years, the building was put to other uses. It has served as a residence and as a cinema. During all that time, it was hardly missed as a theatre, because the theatre-going public no longer lived in the old town. They'd long since moved to the new Panama City nearby. Since then, the cathedral, too, hasn't had the same kind of congregation. That's because the historic houses in the old town are now home to menial workers and, in some cases, criminals. The once lordly addresses, today ownerless and left to fall into ruin, provide the descendants of slaves with cheap and often free accommodation. Not rented, simply occupied. Here, drug trafficking and prostitution thrive. This is a ghetto inhabited by blacks who have no share in the good, clean business done in the air-conditioned high-rise blocks of the new city. It was only after the old city was declared part of the world's cultural heritage that interest was shown again in the historic facades. Situated on the large square opposite the cathedral is the once elegant Hotel Central. Today, like some architectural sleeping beauty, the building lies in a deep slumber. Someday, perhaps, like her, it will be awakened to new life. Indeed, it seems as if the entire old town is waiting for a prince to give it the self-same revitalizing kiss. Real estate speculators are waiting too. But today the town's pulse is to be felt in the new Panama City. And it's here that our crime story continues, Chapter 5. After Inca gold and African slaves, in the 20th century, South America's drugs became the big business. And, along with drug trafficking, laundering the money from it. Although Panama's most famous drug dealer, general and dictator Patricio Noriega was sent to prison in Miami quite some time ago, rumors of organized drug trafficking and money laundering still persist in Panama. The national currency is the dollar. The authorities are helpful and discreet. Business people and bank customers don't have to worry about being asked awkward questions. So it's not surprising that foreign investigators should suspect that crime is being aided and abetted. Proving it, though, is another matter. Chapter 6. The old town really is prestigious again. In the new millennium, it suddenly became trendy to live in one of these historic houses. More and more of the dilapidated buildings are being renovated. And they are not always houses that had already been gutted and had thus become uninhabitable even for squatters. Often, a property like this first has to be vacated. Time and again, fires break out in the old town for no apparent reason. Afterwards, construction workers move in to create luxury accommodation in a historic setting. It seems that there will soon be an end to the decay, that the restoration even of buildings like this is merely a matter of time, and that the previous occupants will all have to leave. Just where the present inhabitants of the old town will go to, what they will live off, that will be dealt with in the next, as yet unwritten chapter in the history of Crime Scene Panama.